Tonight, cross-country weather warnings. Snow and powerful winds batter Canada from coast to coast. A blast of Arctic air brings extreme cold to the west.
Bad days like this make the good days a whole lot better.
In the east, widespread disruptions. Schools shut, flights canceled, and thousands in the dark.
There shouldn't be this fear and intimidation.
Canadian universities slammed with class action lawsuits, claiming Jewish students aren't safe. In Saskatchewan, controversy over parental permission for preferred pronouns at school. Plus, a Canadian medical first, self-screening for signs of cervical cancer.
I felt safe. It was easy.
And the Winnipeg Jets on a winning streak.
You have to give them credit.
Rocketing to the top of the NHL standings.
And he scored!
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening, everyone. We begin again tonight with a deep and potentially dangerous chill sweeping across the country. In eastern Canada, thousands without power after a major blast of snow. In parts of British Columbia, flood alerts and crippling cold. And a bone-chilling polar vortex plunging the prairies into a freeze. All of Alberta under an extreme cold weather alert. So intense in some parts, frostbite can develop in under 60 seconds. Even some ski hills are closed.
No one really wants to go out when it's this cold anyways.
And Alberta is where we begin tonight with Bureau Chief Bill Fortier.
Normally, this is a popular walking path snuggled into Edmonton's River Valley. Today, just a few brave folks.
Bad days like this make the good days a whole lot better.
Until this week, nature has been gentle with an unusually warm fall and start to winter. Now, winter's wrath has hit Alberta with fresh snow in Edmonton and Calgary, an Arctic air mass bringing temperatures in the -20s, wind chills in the -30s.
Bundle up as you head outside. Try and eliminate as much exposed skin as you can. If you can avoid spending extended periods of time outside, that's the best bet.
Saskatoon woke up to nearly 15 centimeters of snow, the first real snowfall of the year.
Oh no, it's finally winter.
The weather system that dropped that snow now moving into Manitoba, prompting weather advisories and warnings to drivers.
How you drive in the summer is not how you drive in the winter. So be mindful of your surroundings.
Even in famously mild Vancouver, an Arctic blast is expected to bring winter weather tomorrow, the city advising people to avoid driving if possible. The lower mainland also preparing for significant wind that could result in coastal flooding.
As those winds travel down the strait, they will generate strong, large waves.
And the already frigid conditions in Alberta are going to get even colder. Edmonton could plunge to -40 Friday, something that hasn't happened since 1972.
So it is going to be dangerously cold for several days for a large chunk of the prairies.
When it's that cold, only the hardiest are likely to be outside.
What do you do to keep yourself warm when it's that cold?
Just layers. Layers, try and use wool, and balaclava makes a huge difference.
As for when this cold spell will end, meteorologists say it's tough to predict, but this Arctic air is likely here until the end of next week at the earliest. Omar.
All right, frigid few days ahead. Bill, thank you. And let's bring in Atlantic Bureau Chief Creason Adjukate now, who's been tracking conditions in the east. And Creason, what's it looking like where you are?
Omar, the wet and heavy snowstorm that hit Ontario and Quebec earlier this week has now made its way here in the Maritimes.
When you live in the Maritimes, clearing the way for your neighbors comes with the territory.
I just help people in the neighborhood that can't do it and save some money, you know.
It's just messy. It's messy and wet.
A mix of heavy snow, sleet, and rain pounded the east coast today, making travel slow and messy.
Heavy. Well, it was pretty wet. Obviously, it's raining now, so it's a little harder to push.
Northern New Brunswick got most of the snow, up to 25 centimeters in some places, with most businesses and schools forced to shut down.
Really spoiled with the nice weather, and like I was saying to my coworkers at work, we're gonna get the snow right after Christmas.
I had to work today, but I don't mind. It gives me a little chance to come outside, clear the snow.
Canada Post had to also cancel its delivery of mail. Despite all of this, some are hoping for more snow days.
I'm looking forward to real winter. I would like the snow to come, and I'd like it to stay.
Powerful wind gusts of up to 125 kilometers shut down Confederation Bridge to PEI. Also closed schools on the island, canceled most ferry services and some flights, and even blew the roof off this apartment in St. John. In Nova Scotia, the wind snapped trees, knocking out power for thousands.
Most of what we've seen with those high winds is trees coming down into our power lines. In some cases, those trees are either damaging the lines or the poles themselves.
Meanwhile, parts of eastern Quebec received up to 40 more centimeters of snow and rain, with thousands still trying to dig themselves out.
We got more than 15 centimeters in the last night. We also got 12 centimeters on Sunday. That means there's more than 20 centimeters to grab on the curb of the street.
Conditions should improve by Thursday, but for now, about 400 crew members are in Nova Scotia, ready to make repairs throughout the week to restore power to thousands of homes. Omar.
All right, Creason, thank you. And that same storm system has claimed at least 5 lives south of the border. In the Northeast, howling winds sent waves crashing ashore. Many communities are battling floods after torrential rains. The Gulf Coast is recovering slowly from dozens of tornadoes. And now another winter storm is slamming the west, bringing a deadly avalanche at a California ski resort. In Ecuador, the president insisted today his country, already in a state of emergency, is now in a state of war with drug gangs. CTV's Geneviève Beauchemin on the crisis and the Canadians caught in it.
Armed forces and police set their sights on drug cartels, calling gangs military targets. This after Ecuador's president Daniel Noboa declared his country was now at war. Officials say they've arrested more than 70 people, displaying a forceful response aimed at reassuring the country of 18 million people. There's a curfew, shops are closed, classes canceled, and streets in the main cities are nearly empty. Still, violence continues.
It just feels that the level of insecurity and just unknown have just escalated.
Jeff Karam is a Canadian from Toronto, living in Ecuador for 18 years now with his family. A man was shot blocks from his office yesterday.
Just an odd bullet that just unfortunately hit him and killed him. And he's a father, has a family.
Ecuador was once a peaceful haven in South America. In the last 5 years, though, gangs vying for the control of the drug trade have morphed it into a narco war zone. And they've taken control of nearly 1/4 of the country's prisons. Noboa has vowed to crack down. On Monday, he declared a state of emergency after the prison break of a kingpin, Adolfo Marcias, alias Fito. Gangs have taken guards and police officers hostage. Videos of executions have circulated online. The escalation of violence came into sharp focus Tuesday. Masked men stormed a television station, pointing guns, wielding explosives as people watched on live TV. Police tactical squad ended the standoff, arresting a dozen people. That TV station is 20 minutes from Karam's home. Now he's considering whether to pack up and leave.
It's really sad that Ecuador has turned into what it is, because it really is an amazing country.
More than 2,300 Canadians are registered in Ecuador. In recent days, 18 of them have reached out to Global Affairs for questions surrounding issues like travel. Omar.
All right, Jen, thank you. The Israel-Hamas war is far from over, but efforts are on to determine what will happen when it does end. Today, America's top diplomat Antony Blinken was in the West Bank to meet Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas. The U.S. says it sees a role for the Palestinian Authority to govern both the West Bank and Gaza. Today, the Israeli Prime Minister said this about the enclave's future.
Israel has no intention of permanently occupying Gaza or displacing its civilian population.
Israel is preparing to defend itself at the UN court later this week against South Africa's allegations of genocide in Gaza. So far, Canada has not taken a position on the claims. And some Canadian universities may soon have to defend themselves in court from a series of lawsuits accusing them of failing to protect Jewish students from anti-Semitism. CTV's Adrian Gobriel has the details.
Free, free Palestine! University campuses across Canada have played host to a growing number of protests since the start of the Israel-Hamas war, in some cases leading to student-on-student violence. And now multiple Canadian universities are facing a series of proposed class action lawsuits with claims that Jewish students are unsafe on campus.
You should not be allowed to bring the Hamas flag to a university.
McMaster University and its student union are the latest to face legal action. A statement of claim reads that Jewish students are facing systemic discrimination, harassment, hatred, anti-Semitism, violent discourse, and actual or threatened physical harm. The lawsuits have been launched by a Toronto-based personal injury firm with the support of the Lawfare Project, an American nonprofit that funds legal actions to protect the civil and human rights of Jewish people.
They're scared to go to school. They're scared to wear anything that delineates the fact that they're Jewish.
Both McMaster and its student union declined a request for an interview. The university did respond with an email saying in part that fostering an environment that is safe and inclusive for all members of the McMaster community has always been and continues to be a critical priority for the university, which condemns all forms of hatred. Despite this lawsuit, a McMaster professor also came under fire in October for calling for the deportation of pro-Palestinian protesters. Canada has a long history of protests on campuses. It's an act of free speech and expression worth protecting, according to U of T higher education professor Glenn Jones.
Universities are places of inquiry with the notion of challenging sometimes existing orthodoxies and existing ideas. And they have to be as free as possible in that, within obvious limitations.
You can disagree with Israel. You can say that there needs to be a ceasefire. These are all things that are tantamount to free speech. You cannot say we need to kill the Jews.
Similar class action claims have been made against York, Concordia, Queen's, UBC, and right here at Toronto Metropolitan University. The firm says they expect to file additional lawsuits against other post-secondary institutions in the days ahead. Omar.
All right, Adrian, thank you. The family of an Ontario man shot dead after a football game in Miami is welcoming the news that a suspect has now been identified and interviewed.
The family want justice. We want that person caught who did that senseless act. And for him to pay for the crime.
Police say 30-year-old Dylan Isaacs of Six Nations, Ontario was gunned down after an altercation with the driver of a vehicle that allegedly struck him. A silver Honda Accord has been seized as part of the investigation. The CEO of Boeing says he's grateful that no one lost their life when a door panel blew off an Alaska Airlines 737 MAX 9 last week.
I saw the picture, everybody saw the opening, but what I really saw was the empty seat. I imagine every human being who would see that understands the severity and the consequence.
U.S. regulators say 171 of those jets will remain grounded until the company revises instructions for inspection and maintenance. The son of President Joe Biden is one step closer to being held in contempt of Congress for refusing to testify behind closed doors before U.S. lawmakers as part of an impeachment inquiry into his father.
Mr. Chairman, there are 23 ayes and 14 noes.
The ayes have it.
A congressional committee has voted to advance the contempt charges against Hunter Biden to a full vote by Congress. The hearing was briefly plunged into chaos when Biden himself made a surprise appearance. He stayed for part of the debate before leaving without comment. And Donald Trump's desire to deliver his own closing argument in the civil fraud trial against him won't happen after his lawyers rejected the judge's ground rules. He was asked to focus on the facts of the case and not deliver a campaign speech. Donald Trump's most vocal critic, Chris Christie, announced he's dropping out of the presidential race today. Just moments before that, he was caught on a hot mic backstage saying this.
And she's going to get smoked. And you and I both know it. She's not up to this.
Christie appeared to be referencing Nikki Haley, who he said would get smoked, and that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis called him petrified. Both Republican candidates, Christie believes, are not taking on Trump strongly enough. Coming up,
it is going to pick up a lot more cases.
self-screening for HPV to help detect cervical cancer. Plus, one hockey team's rise through the ranks. In a little more than 2 weeks, BC will become the first province in Canada to launch a self-screening program for cervical cancer. It means women will be able to test in the privacy of their own homes, a major shift in screening and early detection. CTV's Heather Wright reports.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Minister.
Christina Price wasn't due for her regular Pap test, the traditional method used to screen for cervical cancer. But when she saw an ad for a BC pilot project, an at-home HPV test, she decided to give it a try.
The instructions were easy to follow, it was easy to do, and I sent it back right away.
She later got a call from her gynecologist. She had a high-risk type of HPV. A biopsy followed, and the cancerous tissue was quickly removed.
We caught my cancer early when it could be easily treated.
The pilot project that caught Price's HPV is now being rolled out to the rest of the province. The tests don't screen for cancer, but since HPV can cause cancer, it's considered an early and accurate way to detect any problems.
It's a much more sensitive test than a Pap test, which means that it is going to pick up a lot more cases.
According to the Canadian Cancer Society, cervical cancer is the fastest increasing cancer among women in Canada, increasing at a rate of roughly 3.7% per year since 2015. And like with any cancer, early detection is key, but so is being able to access screening.
We know that about 16% of Canadians live in rural and remote communities, and traveling to a healthcare provider to get screened carries with it many financial and logistical challenges.
In fact, racialized women are twice as likely to have never had a Pap test, while cervical cancer in Indigenous women is 6 times higher than the general population. The Canadian Cancer Society is urging other provinces to adopt the HPV test as the primary way to screen for cervical cancer. It's more accurate, more accessible, and the at-home kit is expected to cut down on testing delays, as the HPV swab is easier to process. Heather Wright, CTV News, Toronto.
The NHL revealed a new initiative today to help players deal with mental health issues.
Certainly, there are many players out there who are functioning at a very high level professionally who aren't necessarily living well or thriving. So first, it begins talking and sharing that vulnerability.
The program is designed to help athletes boost their resiliency skills and recognize potential warning signs. Still ahead, the battle over divisive law, challenging a controversial pronoun policy in schools. The question of whether a student under 16 can change their names or pronouns without parental permission came before a Saskatchewan judge today. It became an issue after the province invoked their rarely used notwithstanding clause to enact a law requiring teachers to ask parents first. CTV's Allison Bamford explains.
A heated debate that brought hundreds to the steps of the Saskatchewan Legislative Building last year is back in the hands of the court. A Regina LGBTQ2S+ organization is challenging a new provincial law that requires parental consent before students under 16 can change their name or pronouns at school. This week's hearing will help determine if the legal challenge against the Saskatchewan government will go ahead.
Every day we're in court here, the months that have passed, every day there are kids just trying to go to school in Saskatchewan and New Brunswick, across the country, in a safe, welcoming, inclusive manner.
Lawyers representing UR Pride told court that the law unjustifiably limits the rights of gender-diverse youth who may be outed or misgendered as a result of the bill. The Saskatchewan government continues to argue the case is moot after the law was passed using the notwithstanding clause last fall.
We want to protect those rights that parents have to be involved in their child's lives and important discussions about their children.
UR Pride is looking to amend its arguments to focus on a specific section of the charter that protects against cruel and unusual treatment. Advocacy groups are paying close attention to this case and one in New Brunswick that challenges a similar government policy.
Laws and policies should not violate charter rights of anyone,
but especially young people and people from vulnerable communities.
UR Pride argues it's in the public's best interest for the court to see this challenge through. The hearing is expected to wrap up Thursday when the government lays out the brunt of its arguments. The judge is likely to reserve his decision for a later date. Allison Bamford, CTV News, Regina.
After the break, soaring to the top of the NHL, the Winnipeg Jets take off and take over the top spot. Canadian hockey fans have a lot to feel good about. Halfway into the NHL season, 3 teams from north of the border are sitting top 10 in league standings. Remarkably, after a slow start to their year, the Winnipeg Jets are holding the #1 spot. CTV's Manitoba Bureau Chief Jill Makashon now on what's fueling the Jets.
The Winnipeg Jets are flying high, first in the NHL standings with 7 wins in a row, 13 without a regulation loss.
We've got off to an exceptional start, and I think winning makes the job a lot easier.
With the January cold creeping into Winnipeg, fans now have a red-hot hockey team to warm their spirits.
They're doing awesome.
I'm happy with it, yeah. It's really nice to see everyone coming together and supporting them as well.
But that's taken a little convincing. Over the past year, the fan base has fallen off. In one of the league's smallest markets, in an arena that seats just over 15,000 fans, ticket sales slumped. There were concerns raised in fall that fewer people seemed willing to invest in the Jets.
A lot of people have had to make tough choices, tough decisions on how to spend their money. And I think, Jets tickets have maybe become a luxury item for some, whereas in the past it was a no-brainer that they were coming. But one thing the team has done, you have to give them credit, they're putting an entertaining and competitive product on the ice.
A summer trade added depth to the team with 3 new forwards. Center Mark Scheifele and the hottest goalie in the league right now, Connor Hellebuck, both signed long-term contracts. The foundations of the Jets have been set, and it's working. The team is energized, and it's drawing fans back.
Winnipeggers will back it up, but you can see the excitement. We're going to make it. We're going to go far this year.
Heroic scores! Winnipeg's biggest competition might be another Canadian team. The Vancouver Canucks, now second in the league, 2 teams most wouldn't have gambled on at the start of the season. And Winnipeg's coach isn't sold yet.
Until you win a Stanley Cup, there's always room for improvement.
The Jets have just come off another win, beating the Columbus Blue Jackets last night by a score of 5-0. They take on the Chicago Blackhawks tomorrow, with limited tickets available for that game. Omar?
We will see if they can keep up their streak of success. Jill, thank you. And that is a snapshot of this Wednesday for all of us at CTV National News. Thank you for watching. Good night, and see you tomorrow.